In this first guided exercise, I want to walk you through some of the things you may do when you're beginning a data analysis project. And at the same time, we'll review some of the basics of Excel because we're going to be using Excel extensively. You should have downloaded the Excel workbook, and we are going to be working through the guided questions worksheet that goes along with this lesson, which can be found on the third tab of the Excel file that you should have just downloaded, the Seattle housing data. Okay, let's make sure you have accessed the file. If you haven't done so, on the Moodle page, scroll down to Module 1B. It brings you to this page. Using Excel for Data Exploration Part 1. Go to number 1, download and open. Click on this link. You can open the file with Microsoft Excel. It should open the file for you. And when it opens up in Excel, you may have this little yellow bar across the top, and you need to just go ahead and press Enable Editing. Once you do that, the file will become read-only, and so you'll want to then go ahead and make a copy for yourself. Save it to your hard drive or your OneDrive and so forth. So you can pause here, take a moment to save it. Okay, I've saved my workbook as guided exercise number 1, worked out. I like to identify my file as this is my working file. So you can also go ahead and take a look at the different tabs. So the first tab is the actual raw data. Select on it, you can just see a spreadsheet of data. The next tab is data descriptions. So it gives us some information on the variables, some of the definitions of the rating variables, and then the worksheet that we're going to be working from, the guided questions. And this data is from a website called Kaggle.com, Kaggle.com, that has many open data sets. So if someone handed you this data file of the Seattle housing data and said, analyze this data, where would you begin? Well, if we look at the CRISP DM steps, the first step is a business understanding. And we can see here, determine the business objectives. What's the purpose of analyzing this data? Put another way, what are the meaningful questions we want to ask? Or what do we want this data to tell us? What questions do we want this data to answer? So let's take a look at our data again. And it's housing data. It's based on the sales of houses. Let's say our purpose of the analysis is to identify factors that influence the selling price of a home. Or perhaps our purpose is to predict the selling price of a home. Knowing this ahead of time gives direction to our analysis. And while we may not know precisely what we want to find out, if we have a general idea, the analysis is more likely to produce useful information. So selling price is what we're interested in. And so as a next step, let's visually explore the data, the raw data that we have. So if we look at the spreadsheet, we have ID, date, price, and so forth. But if we look at price, it's in this strange format. One helpful tool in Excel is manually resizing columns. If I hover here, I get this bar with double arrows, and I can just resize my columns. Excel will also auto-size columns. So if I hover over the line between columns C and D and then double click, it's going to resize this column to make sure it can fit every number that's given here in this column. Before we do that, these pound signs here indicate not that there's some sort of error, but it's an indication that the numbers or the number itself does not fit into the cell the way it is in this size. So I'm going to hover over the line between C and D and double click. The column resizes automatically. You can also do that for column G, which has the number signs here indicating that the cell is too small to show the whole number. So I'm going to double click on the line between G and H, and it gives me an auto size column. Take a moment to look at the different variables, the labels across the top, to get an idea of what kind of data is collected on each of these housing transactions. You can also go to the Data Descriptions tab again and look at the list of variables. You can pause and take a moment to do that. Once we're familiar with our data file, we want to identify our variable of interest if we're doing a supervised data analysis project. For our problem, since we're interested in what factors affect price, our main variable of interest would be the variable price. This will be called our outcome variable. We'll use this term a lot, outcome variable, but you can also think of it as the dependent variable or the response variable. So what variables might logically be related to price? What variables have an influence on price? For example, does the number of bedrooms affect price? Does the number of square feet of living area affect price? So take a moment to look through these variables and see which ones you think could indeed affect price. These variables are going to be called predictor variables. They can also be called independent variables. I often use the term predictor variable. Before we start analyzing the data, it's a good practice to make a copy of the worksheet containing the original data, to preserve that original data, and use the copy to work with. So let's go ahead and copy our raw data. Click on the tab, right-click. We're going to select Move or Copy. In this little pop-up menu, I'm going to click Create a Copy. We'll go ahead and move it to the end. I'm going to hit OK. It is possible to also make a copy of a worksheet and move it to a new book, a completely new file. You can also even change the color of the tabs. If I click on the tab, right-click, I can click Tab Color, and I can choose any color that I want for the tab. Okay, next let's take a look at our guided questions and see if we can answer any. Go to our Guided Questions tab, and the first question asks, what's the purpose of the data mining project? In other words, what is the meaningful question we want to ask? In our case, we're dealing with housing data, and we're interested in predicting the selling price of a home in the Seattle area. Number 2, visually explore the variables in raw data. We've done that. Number 3, what is the outcome variable? Or what's the dependent variable? Since we're trying to predict the selling price of a house, our outcome variable will be, we go back to the raw data, our outcome variable will be price. In these guided questions, we can type in our answer. Number 4, what are some possible predictor variables? We can look back at our raw data. We can say bedrooms is a possible predictor, bathrooms, square feet living. Many of these are possible predictors. Latitude and longitude. Could those be possible predictors? Potentially, but that's a little bit beyond our scope. So we're going to actually exclude those. And the same goes for zip code. In a more advanced analysis, we could probably glean some sort of predictive information out of zip code. But for right now, we're just going to leave that one out. Number 5, make a copy of the worksheet. We've done that.